Resignation refused. New details on what Pope Francis said to a French cardinal convicted of concealing clergy sexual abuse. We have a report from Rome. Pro-life and the election. We're in Virginia with a look at how the Democrats' push to expand abortion is playing with voters. Uniting the States. A new book on how to save America from a culture of contempt. And first day on the job. An important anniversary for Pope Francis. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, March 19th, 2019. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. President Trump welcomes a leader dubbed the Trump of the Tropics to the White House. He and Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro presented a united front against Venezuela, and President Trump warned that country may face even more sanctions. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. The president making those comments in the Rose Garden today alongside his Brazilian counterpart, who has a lot in common with President Trump. Now, today, President Trump still saying that all options are on the table in dealing with Venezuela.
We haven't done the toughest of sanctions, as you know. We've done, I would say, right down the middle. But we can go a lot tougher if we need to do that. But it's a very sad thing. We're not looking for anything other than taking care of a lot of people that are starving and dying in the streets. What's happening there is a disgrace.
Both President Trump and Brazil's president are critics of Venezuela's socialist leader, Nicolas Maduro. President Bolsonaro has shown support for President Trump's hardline stances on immigration. And today he said he opposes gender ideology, political correct attitudes, and fake news. Bolsonaro predicted President Trump will be reelected in 2020. And on that note, today President Trump also criticized Democratic presidential candidates for their push to add seats to the Supreme Court.
The only reason is that they're doing that is they want to try and catch up. So if they can't catch up through the ballot box by winning an election, they want to try doing it in a different way. Now, we would have no interest in that whatsoever. It'll never happen. It won't happen, I guarantee you, it won't happen for 6 years.
During the joint press conference in the Rose Garden, President Trump also bashed Facebook and Twitter for discriminating against Republicans. He says something should be done to make social media companies liable for their content. The president believes those companies are on the side of, as he said, radical left Democrats. Now, back to Brazil, the country has been seeking the status of a major non-NATO ally, which is just a step short of full membership in NATO. And today, President Trump said he's looking at U.S. support for Brazil's efforts to gain some of those NATO privileges. Lauren.
White House correspondent Mark Irons. Thank you, Mark. In a meeting with Greek Orthodox leaders last night, President Trump praised their country and people.
You honor hard work, you love your families, you enrich your culture, and you embrace the American dream, and you keep faith in the blessings of Almighty God. And that's great.
The ceremony honored Greece's independence from the Ottoman Empire. Greece celebrates its independence next Monday. Several new developments tonight in the Catholic Church's clergy sexual abuse crisis. West Virginia's Attorney General sues the state's lone Catholic diocese and former Bishop Michael Bransfield on charges they knowingly employed child abusers. The Diocese of Wheeling-Charleston tells News Nightly it has no immediate comment and says it is planning to release a statement on the claims. And in Mississippi, the Diocese of Jackson releases the names of 37 priests and other clergy members credibly accused of sexual abuse. Bishop Joseph Kopaz says none of the accused remains in active ministry. The probe dated from 1924 and analyzed the files of nearly 1,000 clergy members. Bishop Kopaz says he is truly, deeply sorry for pain caused by misconduct, and he says he is taking steps to prevent future abuse. Pope Francis has declined to accept the resignation of a French cardinal who was convicted of failing to report a known predator priest to police. Yesterday, the Holy Father received Cardinal Philippe Barbarin of Lyon in the Vatican. Barbarin offered the Pope his resignation after receiving a 6-month suspended sentence earlier this month for failing to report an abuser priest. Edward Penton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register, joins us. Ed, why did the Holy Father decline Cardinal Barbarin's resignation?
Well, Cardinal Barberin said that the Pope was effectively invoking the presumption of innocence, which is why he didn't accept the resignation. The statement that was put out by the Vatican today was that the Pope thought there were difficulties at this time in the diocese, which the Cardinal needed to handle. He wanted to leave him free to make the decision on how to best handle the diocese and the problems there. And so he didn't want to accept the resignation. Also, it's important to point out that the Pope also refused his resignation back in 2016 as well.
But now he has been convicted in a civil court.
That's right, yes, but it was a suspended sentence, and the Cardinal is appealing it. He's always protested his innocence about this cover-up allegation, and so this appeal is going to go forward, and he feels that that's a case that he has to be made, and that he thinks he has a case to be made in that regard.
So will he go back to France?
Well, he's going to fight this appeal. I think he says that he's innocent. He's protested these allegations of cover-up, and I think the Pope agrees with him in this, in the sense that he hasn't accepted his resignation, because I think he feels that he has a case to be made, and he will fight this appeal. And so that's going to be the next steps for him.
The Pope held a summit in February that we covered extensively on sex abuse. Do you think that Pope Francis it has this in mind right now?
Yes, well, certainly that summit will have helped, but I think this case, rather like in a sense the Cardinal Pell case, where there's also an appeal in process, I think the Vatican wants to stand back and not take decisions on accepting resignations of cardinals until those appeals have run their course. And so I think that's really the essence of this decision today, to see how this appeal turns out. But there are questions about the Pope himself and how he's handling these abuse cases. There's of course this ongoing case of an Argentinian bishop, Zanqueta, who the Pope knew about these allegations, but at the same time brought him to the Vatican and gave him a post here. So there are question marks about that, which have come since the Vatican summit last month.
Thank you so much, Edward Penton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register.
Thank you, Lauren.
New Zealand's Prime Minister says she will do everything in her power to deny the accused mosque gunman a platform for his white supremacist views. The Prime Minister, in a passionate speech before Parliament, said she won't speak his name and urged others to do the same, saying he wanted attention. The 28-year-old fired his lawyer and plans to represent himself, raising fears he will use the trial to air his political ideas. At least 50 people were killed last Friday in attacks on 2 mosques in Christchurch. Up to 1,000 people might be dead after a deadly cyclone tore through 2 towns in Mozambique. Heavy rains are expected to continue in the Catholic country until at least Thursday. Rising floodwaters have created an inland ocean threatening thousands of families and aid workers. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is back in the Middle East this week, pushing for action against Iran. It's his second trip to the region this year, but this time his message will likely get a mixed reaction. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby reports from the State Department. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. Iran remains a key issue for Secretary Pompeo this week. He's also talking about the United States' role in Syria and how best to fight terrorist groups like ISIS. Not all U.S. allies in the Middle East agree, though, on how to confront those challenges. America's top diplomat departing for the Middle East on a tour taking him to 3 strategic countries. First, Secretary Pompeo visits Kuwait. He'll have his work cut out for him in the small, oil-rich nation. For months, the U.S. has been trying to repair relations among the Gulf states, who have been split after Saudi Arabia imposed an economic blockade on Qatar for not breaking their close economic ties with Iran. Iran's president yesterday urged Iranians to put a curse on the United States and Saudi Arabia, reiterating his long-standing charge the U.S. and its allies are responsible for the country's ailing economy. Pompeo's second stop? Israel. There, Pompeo will meet with a staunch ally, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Netanyahu is likely to use Pompeo's visit for his own political advantage, as he campaigns for re-election in 3 weeks. The State Department insists Pompeo's visit is strictly for the sake of the U.S.-Israeli alliance. Jim Phillips, a Middle East analyst, says Iran remains Israel's biggest foe. The Trump administration and the Israelis have called out the Iranian regime.
Supporting terrorism and working on nuclear weapons while lying about it, while building up ballistic missile forces and increasingly intervening in Syria, Yemen.
Phillips says Iran's support for the terrorist group Hezbollah might make Pompeo's third and last stop his most difficult, Lebanon. There, Hezbollah, who is backed by Iran, is a political party in the government.
And I think the administration is trying to get out ahead of the crises at the same time that it's implementing its maximum pressure strategy on Iran. I think it wants to limit Hezbollah's freedom of maneuver, not only to threaten Israel, but to subvert Lebanon's sovereignty.
During his trip, Pompeo is also expected to talk about the administration's Israeli-Palestinian peace plan. Pompeo is quoted as saying people of all faiths will have something to say about that plan. The White House is expected to release more details about those talks after Israel's elections. Lauren?
Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby reporting from the State Department. Thank you, Wyatt. Coming up, what voters in Virginia think of the Democrats' recent push for pro-abortion legislation. Pro-life Americans plan to keep Democrats' abortion stances alive on the 2020 campaign trail. Virginia races will be a proving ground as every seat in the legislature is up for renewal, and Democrats could have a slight lead. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi reports from Harrisonburg, Virginia, in the Shenandoah Valley. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. Republicans still hold a two-seat majority in both chambers of the State House here in Virginia, but Democrats are really trying to flip it blue, and they may be helped by redistricting. Just yesterday, the U.S. Supreme Court heard a case about a new map for the House of Delegates here in Virginia, and it seemed to favor the Democrats. How will Virginia voters judge their candidates? U.S. Congressman Ben Cline served 16 years in the Virginia State House.
It shocked and appalled not just Virginia, but the entire nation, and it will stick with voters in November.
Virginia erupted as the epicenter of a national abortion debate when Democratic delegate Kathy Tran introduced a bill to allow abortion up to birth.
Mr. Chairman, that would be a decision that the doctor, the physician, and the woman would make.
I understand that. I'm asking
point.
if your bill allows that.
My bill would allow that, yes.
Then, Democratic Governor Ralph Northam said this in support of the bill.
The infant would be delivered. The infant would be kept comfortable. The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired. And then a discussion would ensue between the physicians and the mother.
The failed bill would have also wiped out a lot of the state's pro-life protections.
We're still eager to push for, on behalf of life, for more legislation in that area, not just in Richmond, but also in Washington. And I think our best days are yet to come.
President Trump won about 70% of this county in a state Hillary Clinton won by 5 points. We ask voters if abortion will be a big issue this fall.
I am pro-life.
For me personally, though, it's not an overwhelmingly concerning issue to me.
8 months left until Virginians vote. The Republican-controlled House of Delegates is defending the map it created in 2011 after the last census, but a lower court ruled against it and picked a new map created by an outside expert. Now the Supreme Court is weighing this case, and they don't have a lot of time. Candidates only have until March 28th to sign up for the primaries here in Virginia. Lauren?
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi reporting. Thank you, Jason. Joining us now is Steve Aden, Chief Legal Officer and General Counsel at Americans United for Life. Welcome back to our broadcast.
Thank you, Lauren.
We just heard from Jason, who said abortion is going to be a major issue in Virginia. Is Virginia a good litmus test, do you believe, for what we can expect to see across the country?
I certainly think so. It's actually a bellwether state. It's a deep purple state, as you know. And I think that many Virginians feel very passionately about the life issue, and they, along with the rest of the country, were shocked and horrified to hear the comments by their governor, Governor Northam, as well as Representative Tran, and they want to know, is this the face and voice of the Democratic Party? Do they really want to embrace this radical pro-abortion extreme ideology and be known as the party of abortion. I hope not.
Or the party of
I hope
death,
not.
as I'm also
Yes,
hearing.
that's
Well,
right.
just yesterday, Democratic presidential candidate Beto O'Rourke reportedly answered a question about late-term abortions, to your point, by saying, quote, "It's about abortion and reproductive rights, and that should be a decision the woman makes." A Marist poll in January, I'm sure you saw it, showed that Americans are overwhelmingly opposed, 71% to late-term abortions. So how can Democrats, with that Marist poll number, be saying things that they are about abortion?
Well, unfortunately, I think some of them feel they have no choice because they feel beholden to Planned Parenthood, the abortion industry, and even to the platform of the Democratic Party, which is a radical pro-abortion platform. It actually calls for the repeal of the Hyde Amendment, which is a pro-taxpayer conscience protection that prohibits the use of federal taxpayer dollars, yours and mine, to pay for elective abortions, and by some indications has saved about 2 million lives since it was first enacted back in the late 70s. But they feel they can't even go 1 inch away from that extreme position, that if they back away from the cliff of abortion for anyone, for any reason, at any time, then they'll get whacked politically by Planned Parenthood and others, and they feel they can't do that.
But it doesn't make sense, right? Because if they're not paying attention to the voters.
They're not paying attention to the voters, and as you said, about the same numbers, 70% or more, Americans want more regulation of abortion. They don't want abortion on demand all the time for any reason. And yet here we have all of these candidates. In fact, if you go down the line with the candidates who've declared for the Democratic nomination, every single one of them proclaims himself or herself a diehard supporter of so-called abortion rights till the very end, even including those after-birth abortions that New York has defended and now enshrined in law, where a baby lies on the table and expires because there's no care for it.
Before we go, we don't have much time, but many heartbeat bills are advancing through the legislature. Do you think these laws withstand court challenges?
Well, those are difficult, obviously, because of the early gestation abortion. The heartbeat is detected between 6 and 8 weeks after conception. But what it really shows is that there is a huge groundswell in the states for limiting abortion, a lot of passion out there. And it's a mirror image, a reflection of the extremity on the left that's pro-abortion. And so I don't think you should be surprised to see people who have reacted in shock and horror run to the other side. But we'll see what the Supreme Court does. It is becoming increasingly pro-life.
Yes.
Yeah, and we'll see what the election does in Virginia in the fall. For the first time in decades, the Supreme Court does not have a majority that's committed to a fundamental right to abortion. So we're very hopeful that good things will happen there as well.
Steve Aden, Chief Legal Officer and General Counsel at Americans United for Life. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Lauren.
Up next, a well-known conservative voice tells us his thoughts on how to heal the nation. A Catholic author and head of a conservative think tank says love and gratitude are the keys to bridging our nation's divides. In his new book, Love Your Enemies, How Decent People Can Save America from the Culture of Contempt, Arthur Brooks shares his insights on how we as a nation can find greater harmony. Joining me now is Arthur Brooks, president of the American Enterprise Institute, respected voice on Catholic issues. Arthur, welcome back to our broadcast.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
I want to talk about your book today, which I have read and loved. I'm just going to put that right out there. Now, you say, you're welcome, in your book that America is addicted to political contempt, and you look at the neuroscience behind it. What is it about this outrage industrial complex?
Well, we know that 93% of Americans hate how polarized the country's become. We all have views, we all have political viewpoints, but we hate how polarized, how divided we've become. The other 7% doesn't hate it because they're dining out on it. So the rest of us don't like it, maybe addicted to contempt, addicted to the polarization, but the other side is kind of ginning this whole thing up.
And that's pundits, that's people on Twitter, that's
that's a lot of politicians, that's a whole bunch of the mainstream media is basically making a lot of money and power and fame on this.
Let's talk about President Trump's tirade tweets over the weekend. I mean, he did attack Senator John McCain, he attacked Google, he attacked United Auto Workers, and and Joe Biden and Saturday Night Live, and all of these were aimed at specific groups. Does that have a place?
Well, I actually think that it's not the right thing for the president to do. And the biggest problem is not that the president is doing it, it's that we're all doing it, and we're addicted to this. We have a culture that's basically that's infused with people treating each other, not with anger, but with anger mixed with disgust. This is a real concern for Catholics, because this is something we always talk about, creating a healthier culture.
Love.
And this is what I talk about in the book. So I titled the book, Love Your Enemies. It's funny, I talk to a lot of people, they say, we need more civility or tolerance. Wrong. Civility and tolerance are very low standards. If I said, hey, Lauren, Esther and I, my wife, we're civil to each other, you'd say, you need counseling.
Right, you need to love her.
And so, look, I love your enemies. Matthew 5:44, this is the subversive standard where people want to change culture.
You talk about how the Dalai Lama also instructed you to practice warm-heartedness.
Yeah.
How do you do that in politics?
No, it's so
if
hard.
you practice warm-heartedness and everybody else isn't, you're going to get slammed.
I know. So one of the things that he taught me, he said, don't be thinking about institutions. Don't say that you have to change politics and you have to change America by yourself. You have to change yourself. And in so doing, you'll be more persuasive. Look, the way that we talk to each other, we're persuading nobody. If we want to be more persuasive, you will never insult anybody into agreement. It's never happened in society. So therefore, if you actually, when somebody treats you with contempt, choose to behave the way that your mother taught you to behave, to choose with warm-heartedness. I know.
Thanks, Mom.
It's like our mothers were Buddhist masters, it turns out. that we can be happier, we can be more persuasive, and we can be the beginning of the change that we're supposed to be. Look, we're Catholics. Mm-hmm. We know we're supposed to be subversive in our society, and this is the way to do it. Treat people with love, even if they don't treat us with love.
As you point out, our nation's leaders are fostering this culture of contempt, but you say better, not less disagreement holds the key to greater harmony. Can we really get that when we're talking to each other, at each other?
I think we can, because we actually need to disagree. This is the key thing. People say, we need more agreement in America. Wrong. America is based on competition. Competition in our economy, in our politics, and competition of ideas. So disagreement is a form of competition. Very good thing. But disagreeing better is the only way we will persuade other people, and the only way we'll live up to our own standards, and Lauren, it's the only way we'll get the happiness that we deserve. Disagreeing better is the secret to happiness. I show this with the science, and I show, by the way, this is a solutions book. This is not a problems book. Right. This is 90% solutions. It's a self-help book for all intents and purposes on how to be happier, step by step by step.
You, Dale Carnegie, and you, Martin Luther King, you have Dalai Lama. I mean, you quote all the people who have been trying to do that over the years, and now we can add Arthur Brooks.
I can't live up to those standards, but I'm delighted to be with you, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. We will leave you tonight with 6 years ago today, when the papal inauguration of Pope Francis, March 19th, 2013, happened. We will see you again tomorrow. Good night, and God bless you.